Chalo, let's start. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 19, King Prithu's 100 horse sacrifices, text number 9 onwards. So here Maharaj Prithu performed his horse sacrifices and Mother Earth gave plenty of other things. So here in this verse it says, Sindho Ratnikara Giryo Annam Chaturvidham Upayanam Uja Sarve Lokaha Sapalikaha. King Prithu was presented with various gifts from the general populace and predominating deities of all planets. The oceans and seas were full of valuable jewels and pearls, and the hills were full of chemicals and fertilizers. 4 kinds of edibles were produced profusely. As stated in Ishopanishad, this material creation is supplied with all the potencies for the production of all necessities required by the living entities. Not only human beings, but animals, reptiles, aquatics, and trees. The oceans and seas produce pearls, coral, and valuable jewels so that the fortunate law-abiding people can utilize them. Similarly, the hills are full of chemicals so that when rivers flow down from them, the chemicals spread over the fields to fertilize the 4 kinds of foodstuffs. These are technically known as charvya, those edibles which are chewed, leya, those which are licked up, chushya, those which are sucked, and peya, those which are drunk. So 4 kinds of foodstuffs are produced. There are different kinds, those which are chewed, which are licked up, which are sucked, and which are drunk. And they were produced profusely by Mother Earth. Prithu Maharaj was greeted by the residents of other planets and their presiding deities. They presented various gifts to the king and acknowledged them as the proper type of king by whose planning and activities everything throughout the universe could be happy and prosperous. It is clearly indicated in this verse that the oceans and seas are meant for producing jewels. But in Kali Yuga, the oceans are mainly being utilized for fishing. Shudras and poor men were allowed to fish, but the higher classes like the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas would gather pearls, jewels, and coral. Although poor men would catch tons of fish, they would not be equal in value to 1 piece of coral or pearl. In this age, so many factories for the manufacture of fertilizers have been opened. But when the personality of Godhead is pleased by the performance of yagyas, the hills automatically produce fertilizing chemicals, which help produce edibles in the fields. Everything is dependent on the people's acceptance of the Vedic principles of sacrifice. So the hills are supposed to produce chemicals and fertilizers, and when the rainy season comes, the rains would bring those fertilizers down to the lower ground, and so the lower ground will become fertile, and they would produce plenty of foodstuffs. That would happen if people are doing yagya. But instead of doing yagya to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we want to open factories and then we want to produce all these chemical fertilizers. And this chemical fertilizer, basically they kill the soil. They deplete it so fast. But then so many things government has to do or the farmers have to do to replete them again so that new crops can be grown, but it doesn't last too long. So more and more chemicals are injected in the earth, and then the crops are grown with full of chemicals. No, it doesn't have any taste or any odor in it, but it just looks good because of chemicals. And those chemicals we are eating, and those they create so much of poison in us. That's a cause of cancer. But this is what we've been feeding. And then they go ahead and modify the seeds, genetically modified seeds. Why? Because by modifying seeds in the lab, they think they can produce more crop for the same acreage of land. So more people can be fed by the same crop, by the chemically grown crops. Ultimately, what happens? It just messes up the ecosystem big time. Messes up in the sense, see, when the flowers are produced by these chemically grown plants and chemically modified seeds, the bees, which are supposed to come according to the nature's law or nature's arrangement, the bees would come and take the pollen out of those flowers and make honey or spread the pollen everywhere so that more plants can grow and whatever the nature's law was. And now this is all messed up. The bees which come to take the pollen out of these flowers, bees are dying because they cannot take this chemically grown flowers pollen. Or even if they take, the bees are getting immune to chemicals. But what are they producing after these chemicals? All more junk actually. So it's man-made crisis actually, nothing else. All we have to do is leave the nature alone. Just serve the Supreme Lord, worship the nature, and she will produce plenty. Plenty for everybody's need and desires and everybody's proper maintenance. She will produce plenty. But because we have some higher intelligence, so we want to misuse it and misutilize it, and we think we are better than the nature. We know better than the nature. So men are producing what? They're producing seedless fruits, seedless grapes, seedless oranges, seedless watermelons. They must be working on seedless mangoes and seedless apples also. Why? Because when we eat that grape or orange, if the seed is there, it's very uncomfortable in the mouth. But if nature has kept seed in that fruit, there must be some reason. It's simple as that. But we want to mess with the nature. To such an extent, the nature has to revolt back. And that is why we see so many natural calamities in Kali Yuga. Earthquakes are there, hurricanes are there, tornadoes are there, and so many problems. Not enough rain, too much rain, not enough heat, too much heat, all messed up seasons. It's all because we are not coping up with the nature. We're not going with the scriptures in which it is said, just do the yajna, that's all. The scientific mind is actually demoniac mind, in the sense they don't believe in God and they want to do their own thing. And they say we can produce everything in the lab. So just like there was a group of scientists, they went to God, they went to Krishna, And they said, "Oh, Krishna, we don't need you. We can produce our own man. Now we don't need you." Krishna said, "Okay, fine, but let me first see what you can produce." So scientists said, "Okay." The time and date was fixed where they will gather together and scientists would produce a man and show it to Krishna, and everything approved, then Krishna would go on the break. So Krishna came, scientists came, and scientists got some soil, and they were going to put it together and make man. So they got the soil. Krishna stopped them. He said, "No, no, 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 wait, 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 wait. First you get your own soil. This soil is mine. I produce this soil." So scientists think we can produce this or that, but they can only modify a little to whatever Krishna has given us. But even that modification is actually messing up the nature. So that's where we have to learn. Of course, scientists discoveries are wonderful. Many discoveries are very much helpful to the humankind, especially in the medical line. More and more equipments, technology, medicines are there to help the patients. But at the same time, the other scientists are the ones who, because of them, the diseases are being created. New and new diseases are coming up. So also in construction industry, more and more innovations are being done technology-wise. Many places it's good. Scientists are doing very well. But when it comes to agriculture, there are problems. There are many, many problems. But if we just do the yajna properly and take care of earth properly, she will produce plenty of that food stuff. Iti chadhokshashya prithostu paramodayam asuyan bhagwan indra pratighatam achikarat. King Prithu was dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known as Adhokshaja. Because King Prithu performed so many sacrifices, he was superhumanly enhanced by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. King Prithu's opulence, however, could not be tolerated by the king of heaven, Indra, who tried to impede the progress of his opulence. So whenever somebody is successful, there are so many people who will become jealous of him and try to stop his success. In this verse, there are three significant purposes expressed in the words Adhokshaja, Bhagwan Indra, and Prithu. Maharaj Prithu is an incarnation of Vishnu, yet he is a great devotee of Lord Vishnu. Although an empowered incarnation of Lord Vishnu, he is nonetheless a living entity. As such, he must be a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although one is empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is an incarnation, he should not forget his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In fact, that is the reason they get empowered, because they know their relationships. They're always in the service mode. They're always a devotee. That's why they get, and they're devotees to a very high caliber, and that's why they get the special mercy of the Lord in terms of empowerment. In Kali Yuga, there's many self-made incarnations, rascals, who declare themselves to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words Bhagwan, Indra indicate that a living entity can even be as exalted and as powerful as King Indra. For even King Indra is an ordinary living entity in the material world and possesses the four defects of the conditioned soul. So here Indra is mentioned as Bhagwan Indra. course, he's not Bhagwan, but again, Indra is not an ordinary person. He's a leader of all the demigods. He's king of the demigods, and he's a devotee. He's a devotee. Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Ridyanti Yuga Yuga. Those who are enemies of my devotee Indra, Krishna says, I come to kill them, to annihilate them, to protect my devotee Indra. And also Indra is father of Arjun, who's again one of the pure devotees of Krishna. So Indra is not an ordinary person. He goes through all these cycles of enviousness or does things against Krishna. And in the end, it all ends up glorifying Krishna more or glorifying the devotee more. Like here, we'll see how Prithu Maharaj becomes more glorious because Indra stole the horse of the sacrifice. So, yes, some of his activities are not very glorious or exalted, but overall, he is a great devotee of the Lord. He's not an ordinary. No ordinary person can become the king of all the demigods. Not an ordinary entity. So whatever happens to him or whatever he does that apparently goes against the devotional principles, we can just imagine that he's being used by Krishna to do so. He says, for even King Indra is although he is an ordinary living entity, means he is a Jiva Tattva, not Vishnu Tattva. King Indra is described herein as Bhagwan, which is generally used in reference to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this case, however, King Indra is addressed as Bhagwan because he has so much power in his hands. Despite his becoming Bhagwan, he is envious of the incarnation of God, Prithu Maharaj. The defects of material life are so strong that due to contamination, King Indra becomes envious of an incarnation of God. So this is material world. We should try to understand, however, how a conditioned soul becomes fallen. The opulence of King Prithu was not dependent on material conditions. As described in this verse, he was a great devotee of Adhokshaja. The word Adhokshaja indicates the personality of Godhead, who is beyond the expression of mind and words. However, the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears before the devotee in his original form of eternal bliss and knowledge. The devotee is allowed to see the Supreme Lord face to face, although the Lord is beyond the expression of our senses and beyond our direct perception. So he is Adhokshaja. Adhokshaja, if we break up this word, Adh, Aksha, Ja. So Aksha means eyes, or Aksha also means senses. Ja means born of, or where the senses can reach. Adh means below. So Adhokshaja means even the senses, the reach of the senses is below that personality. That means the senses cannot even reach, cannot conceive of that personality. That is Adhokshaja. So that is Krishna. Our materially conditioned senses cannot approach Krishna. It's only by mercy of the Lord we've been able to see Krishna in the deity form. We've been able to serve Krishna. We can decorate Krishna. We can cook for Krishna. Because out of his mercy, he appears in the deity form. Deities are made of material elements, but the deities are not material. They're just made of material elements because we cannot see, touch, feel, or serve a spiritual. person, because we won't be able to even see him. So he appears in the deity form, but he is always Adhokshaja. That's for sure. Our senses cannot approach him, cannot reach him. Charmenashvamedhena yajmane yajushpatim vanya yagya pasham spardhan napo vahatirohita. When Prithu Maharaj was performing the last horse sacrifice, Ashwamedh Yagya, King Indra, invisible to everyone, stole the horse intended for sacrifice. He did this because of his great envy of King Prithu. So he got so envious that he stole the horse. Love and Kush had also, they didn't steal the horse, they just stopped the horse. And they didn't just steal and being invisible. They were visible, but they captured the horse, and then everybody had to come and fight with them. But here, Indra, he was envious, so envious. He stole the horse, thinking if Prithu Maharaj cannot complete the sacrifice, then he'll not get all the benedictions. King Indra is known as Shat Kritu, which indicates that he has performed 100 horse sacrifices, Ashwamedh Yagya. We should know, however, that the animals sacrificed in the Yagya were not killed. If the Vedic mantras were properly pronounced during the sacrifice, the animal sacrificed would come out again with a new life. That is a test for a successful Yagya. When King Prithu was performing 100 Yagyas, Indra became very envious because he did not want anyone to excel him. So that's the nature of envious person. Being an ordinary living entity, he became envious of King Prithu, and making himself invisible, he stole the horse and thus impeded the Yagya performance. So that was the Yagya, that if somebody steals that horse of the sacrifice which was meant for the Yagya, then the Yagya cannot be completed. It's not like they can buy another horse, because the horse that is supposed to be sacrificed, it had to have many different symptoms on his body that he would be considered proper horse. I read it somewhere, I don't exactly remember all the symptoms, but there had to be many symptoms on the body of the horse. So then he would be considered, yes, this is the right horse. Tam trir bhagwan akshat varmanam vihayasa amuktam ev pakhandam yo adharme dharma vibhrama. When King Indra was taking away the horse, he dressed himself to appear as a liberated person. Actually, this dress was a form of cheating, for it falsely created an impression of religion. When Indra went into outer space in this way, the great sage Atri saw him and understood the whole situation. The word Pakhanda used in this verse is sometimes pronounced Pashanda. Both of these words indicate an impostor who presents himself as a very religious person, but in actuality is sinful. Indra took up the saffron-colored dress as a way of cheating others. The saffron dress has been misused by many impostors who present themselves as liberated persons or incarnations of God. In this way, people are cheated. As we have mentioned many times, the conditioned soul has a tendency to cheat. Therefore, this quality is also visible in a person like Indra. It is understood that even King Indra is not liberated from the clutches of material contamination. Thus, the words amuktam iva, meaning as if he were liberated, are used. The saffron dress worn by a sannyasi announces to the world that he has renounced all worldly affairs and is simply engaged in the service of the Lord. Such a devotee is actually a sannyasi or a liberated person. So that is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. So King Indra, after stealing the horse, or while stealing the horse, he took the form of a sannyasi, or he put on the garments of a sannyasi, saffron colored. Because Vedic principles under Vedic tradition, sannyasis are still given lots of respect. So thinking nobody would harm him, he took up the form. Even Ravan, when he came to kidnap Sita, he took the form of a sadhu and he put on saffron cloths. And out of the respect for saffron, Mother Sita came out of the hut. And then the whole thing happened. Of course, that was also orchestrated by Lord Ram, and so that he could annihilate the whole Rakshas dynasty. But regardless, the saffron color worn by brahmacharis and sannyasis is very much respected. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took that sannyas order so that people would respect him, and then he would be able to preach, he would be able to spread the holy names around. In other words, one who offers the results of his activities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually a sannyasi and yogi. Cheating sannyasis and yogis have existed since the time of Prithu Maharaj's sacrifice. This cheating was very foolishly introduced by King Indra. In some ages, such cheating is very prominent, and in other ages, not so prominent. It is the duty of a sannyasi to be very cautious because, as stated by Lord Chaitanya, a little spot in a sannyasi's character will be magnified by the public. Therefore, unless one is very sincere and serious, he should not take up the order of sannyas. One should not use this order as a means to cheat the public. It is better not to take up sannyas in this age of Kali because provocation are very strong in this age. Only a very exalted person advanced in spiritual understanding should attempt to take up sannyas. One should not adopt this order as a means of livelihood or for some other material purpose. So in Kali Yuga, sannyas is prohibited because people are not qualified to keep up with the requirements of the sannyasa ashram. In ISKCON, Prabhupada gave sannyas diksha to many, many disciples, and they were in their 20s. Prabhupada made them sannyasis. Then Prabhupada has explained that because his main aim was to spread preaching, and he said, I knew I'm taking big risk by awarding them sannyas, but his main purpose was this: all these sannyasis should go out and preach. He had to establish the Sankirtan movement all over the world. So he was willing to take the risk. But a sannyasi, at the same time, it's a very responsible position. Every ashram is responsible, but as a sannyasi is a leader of all the ashrams. He's in a more responsible position than anybody else. So one has to be very careful. But here Indra took the form of a sannyasi when he stole the horse. And then we'll see tomorrow what happens. We'll stop here, see anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, so we can stop here. You all have a wonderful and safe day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Jai Shri
Jai Shri
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada.
Thank you so much.